January of 1976, a chimpanzee named Oliver made headlines. Nobody had seen anything quite like him. His bizarre appearance and strange human-like behavior was unsettling. In fact, anybody that came in contact with him walked away convinced that he was more than just a chimpanzee. Here was an ape who appeared to be a cross between a human and a chimpanzee, a humanzee. But could Oliver really be the result of an encounter between a human and chimp? Was he the first tangible piece of evidence for a hybrid? Scientists would spend the next 30 years trying to find out. I'm Brooke, and today we'll be discussing the curious case of Oliver, a chimpanzee whose appearance was so human-like that people debated his origins for decades. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Armchair Investigator. Since the first European discovery of chimpanzees in the 17th century, our fascination with these animals has remained, using them for entertainment, medical and behavioral research, and everything in between. Oliver's story starts in Central Africa, where, as a baby, he was captured and brought to the United States from the Congo. In 1960, a couple named Frank and Janet Berger purchased him when he was just 4 months old. The Bergers lived in Blackwood, New Jersey, and ran a sideshow act that included pigs, ponies, chimps, and dogs. They even appeared on popular television shows like Saturday Night Live and The Conan O'Brien Show. From the get-go, the Bergers could tell that Oliver was different from any chimp they had owned before. When he was 5 months old, he began walking on his hind legs and rarely ever put his knuckles on the ground. While chimps can walk on their back legs for short periods of time, their pelvis, legs, and feet aren't optimized for extended periods of upright walking. However, this didn't seem to affect Oliver. Not only that, the Bergers' other chimps shunned him, wanting nothing to do with him. But Oliver didn't seem too distraught about it, as he preferred being around humans. In fact, it appears that Oliver was almost always seen as an outsider. It was Frank's brother who initially acquired baby Oliver in Africa. Janet said he purchased Oliver from a native, but there were no other chimps in that area. Oliver also looked different from your typical chimpanzee. He had black fur, lighter skin, and a small bald head that was flatter than his peers. He had pointed ears that were higher than usual and little to no body odor. Psychology professor Gordon Gallup from the State University of New York in Albany said he'd never forget the first time he laid eyes on Oliver, believing that he could in fact be a humanzee.
I thought Oliver might be a humanzee. Oliver had some very peculiar morphological characteristics, facial characteristics that looked surprisingly human-like to me.
Despite not fitting in well with the Bergers' other chimps, Oliver was still a welcome member of the family. He even helped with chores. In an interview with Weird New Jersey magazine, Janet said he would take the wheelbarrow and empty the hay from the stalls, and when it was time to feed the dogs, he would get the pans and mix the dog food for me. According to Janet, he wasn't doing these things to get rewards. He simply wanted to do what the humans around him were doing. And while chimps can certainly be trained to perform tasks, she said Oliver didn't need to be taught. As Oliver got older, they began to notice other things. As he reached sexual maturity, he still didn't take an interest in female chimpanzees. Instead, he became infatuated with Janet, something that became a real concern since chimpanzees are said to be nearly twice as strong as humans. On a number of occasions, he had attempted to try things with Janet, meaning she was no longer safe around him. Oliver spent the first 16 years of his life with the Berger family, but now it was time to look for a new home for him. A Manhattan attorney named Michael Miller had read about Oliver in the newspaper. He was intrigued and needed to know more. At his first meeting with Oliver in December of 1975, he was absolutely blown away. He purchased Oliver that day for $8,000, believing he was important to science. Having no idea how to care for him, he asked Frank Berger to continue looking after him. Michael had purchased Oliver in December, and by January of 1976, rumors of the lawyer's oddity were circulating, with curious onlookers vying to get a glimpse of the strange chimp. even scientists took notice. What was he? Speculation ranged from a human-ape hybrid to Bigfoot to humanity's missing link. In March of that year, Oliver was the main attraction at the Explorers Club annual banquet, a society for scientists and explorers who have dedicated themselves to the advancement of field research, scientific exploration, and resource conservation. Notable members include Buzz Aldrin, Jane Goodall, and Neil Armstrong. Oliver's owner, Michael Miller, told those in attendance he didn't know what Oliver was, but agreed that the chimp had oddly human traits and characteristics, pointing to his dome-like head and ability to walk erect.
As you can see, his head is rather small for proportionate and not proportionate with his body. It's approximately 2/3 the size it ought to be. Mr. Berger, could you run him once again just so people can see that? Okay, thank you very much.
After that, Oliver was invited to appear on a TV special in Japan. Miller agreed, as long as it was for scientific purposes. They spent the next 3 weeks touring the country as a film crew followed along. Oliver underwent a series of tests, with the results announced on the television special called Oliver, Man or Ape. They tested Oliver's center of gravity and concluded that the results were more human than chimp. Oliver also had his blood drawn and chromosomes counted, and the results were shocking. Oliver had 47 chromosomes. That's one more than a human and one less than an ape. Japanese scientists cautioned that the results were far from conclusive. Of the 40 cells analyzed, 38 came back saying Oliver was a chimp, while 2 cells showed 47 chromosomes. Could these results have been from human error? In 1977, after a string of unfavorable tabloid articles, Michael Miller gave Oliver to Ralph Helfer, the owner of a small theme park called Enchanted Village in Buena Park, California. From there, he bounced around to different trainers, including anthropologist Dr. Ken DeCrew, who also agreed that Oliver was unlike any of the hundreds of chimps that he had worked with prior, saying, "This is the classic example. Very often I would sit with him down in the living room with me to drink coffee, and one time he was out of coffee. I never trained him to do this, but maybe he knew it from the past. He got up from the table, walked into the kitchen, picked up the coffee pot, poured coffee into my cup, then into his, and then took the pot back into the kitchen." In 1989, he was purchased by the Berkshire Corporation, a facility that leased out animals for cosmetic and scientific testing. And while Oliver was never used for experiments, he was kept in a small 5x7 cage for nearly a decade. In 1996, the University of Chicago tested portions of Oliver's DNA, revealing that he had 48 chromosomes, that of a normal chimpanzee. In 1998, he was moved to an animal sanctuary in San Antonio, Texas, called Primates, founded by a man named Wallace Sweat. And while Wally had his fair share of apes, he had never seen one quite like Oliver. When Oliver was first brought to the sanctuary, they believed that he would walk on all fours, since he had spent so many years in a small cage. However, he shocked everyone by immediately coming out on 2 legs. Wally said, "I absolutely disagree with anyone who says that Oliver is trained to walk upright. The chimpanzees that we house here walk bent over and with their knees bent. Oliver's stance, when he walks, is with his shoulders back and his knees locked. There's never ever been a chimpanzee trained to walk that has been able to keep that pose." Wally just couldn't shake the notion that Oliver truly was different. In the early 2000s, he was tested for the 3rd time. Again, a sample of his blood was taken and his DNA was studied. Scientists ruled that Oliver did indeed have 48 chromosomes, the normal complement for a chimpanzee. Then they compared his genetic makeup to that of a random chimp, and what they found surprised them. Oliver's DNA sequence was different from the other chimp, making him a rare type of chimpanzee, perhaps a different subspecies. Then there are those who argue that Oliver is a bonobo. For decades, Oliver has baffled scientists. nobody could fully explain why he was so different from the average chimpanzee. But now they had answers. His genetic makeup was different. There's no question that Oliver had a difficult life. At 42, he lost his eyesight, and due to the years he spent in cramped conditions, developed arthritis and struggled to walk upright. He spent his late years with another chimpanzee named Raisin. Then, on June 2, 2012, Oliver passed away. He was at least 55 years old. Oliver's remains were cremated and spread around the sanctuary. It's not clear if Oliver was ever fertile, since he never mated with a chimpanzee due to a lack of interest and attraction. Now, the debate as to whether Oliver was a human-ape hybrid has been solved, but it begs the question, is it scientifically possible for two different species to produce a hybrid offspring? Well, listen to this. Some of the earliest intentionally created hybrid animal species date back 4,500 years to ancient Mesopotamia with the kunga, an offspring of the common donkey and the Syrian onager. Since the late 1700s, tigers and lions have been bred to produce ligers, a hybrid offspring of a male lion and female tiger.
Here on my right, we have a Bengal tiger. She's about 1.5 years old, and she's got that bold black and orange striping. And then on my left, we have a young lion about the same 1.5 years old, who you can see has a much more tawny pale coat. And obviously the mix of the two right here, where the shadow striping and his bold markings show us the liger. He's a liger because his father is a lion, his mother a tiger.
With writer and artist George Whitaker documenting cubs in 1825. Tigans, a hybrid offspring of a male tiger and a female lion, were said to have been presented to Queen Victoria in 1837. Then, in the 1950s, the Africanized honeybee was created. It was a cross between an East African lowland honeybee and a European honeybee. But what about primates? What would happen if we combined human and chimp DNA? After all, it's said that we share around 98% of our gene sequence with them. Well, believe it or not, the concept of a hybrid human-ape has been around since medieval times. In the 11th century, St. Peter Damian wrote about a man living in northwestern Italy who owned a male ape. According to Pope Alexander II, the ape mated with the man's wife, resulting in a son that was much larger than her other two. At 20 years old, he was unable to speak and reportedly resembled the ape. Then there were reports from Antonio Zacelli, a Capuchin friar who was a missionary in Africa from 1698 to 1702. In his memoirs, he wrote about two women in Luanda who were impregnated by big monkeys, most likely apes. When the women gave birth, one baby was allegedly taken by the governor to Portugal, while the other was given to the friars and died several years later in a hospital. He said that due to the extremely lustful behaviors of the primates, sexual contact with humans occurred frequently. Psychologist Gordon Gallup claims that in the 1920s, a human-ape hybrid was produced in a laboratory in Orange Park, Florida, the first primate research center established in the United States. In an interview with The Sun Online, he said, "They inseminated a female chimpanzee with human semen from an undisclosed donor and claimed not only that pregnancy occurred, but the pregnancy went full term and resulted in a live birth." However, after considering the moral and ethical dilemma of what they had created, the decision was made to euthanize the hybrid offspring. One of the most infamous Humanzee experiments was carried out by Russian biologist Ilya Ivanov in the 1920s. His work on artificial insemination had resulted in the breeding of more resilient horses, massively boosting Russian agriculture. In 1910, he turned his attention to the idea of human-ape hybrids, arguing that they would be more intelligent, stronger, and healthier than a human. In February of 1926, with the backing of the USSR and a $10,000 grant, he set off for Africa, arriving in French Guinea in March. His plan was to capture apes and pay local women to assist him. When that didn't work, he got men from his team to donate their sperm so that it could be inseminated into female chimps. In total, they captured 3 females. After a few months, however, there were no viable pregnancies. In fact, there was nothing at all. French authorities would eventually send him home after discovering his heinous plans. But Ivanov wasn't done yet. Back in Russia, he arranged for 20 chimpanzees to be sent to him. Only 4 would survive the journey. Then he advertised for women who would be willing to lend their bodies to science. At least 5 volunteered, with one woman writing, "Dear Professor, with my private life in ruins, I don't see any sense in my further existence. But when I think that I could do a service for science, I feel enough courage to contact you. I beg you, don't refuse me. I ask you to accept me for the experiment." However, by 1930, with his reputation tarnished and his experiment still resulting in no human-ape hybrid, Ivanov was arrested and sent to Kazakhstan, where he died 2 years later. Then in the 1960s, Chinese scientists experimented with implanting human sperm in a female chimpanzee to create a quote-unquote near-human ape. And, according to reports, were successful. And while the experiment never fully came to fruition, the scientists had big plans. Dr. Zhiyong Zhang, one of the researchers involved in the experiment, believed that creating a human-ape hybrid would result in creatures with higher animal intelligence. He said, "The benefits of a new species are legion. The creatures could be used for herding sheep and cows and driving carts. They could be used in exploring space, the bottom of the seas, and mines." Scientists argued that it could even go beyond that, believing these hybrids could offer a solution to the problems that humans face when it comes to the body rejecting animal organ transplants. These hybrids' organs would offer a better match for humans. Factories could be set up that would provide parts from the hybrids, with the goal of ultimately serving the needs of mankind. And as for the ethical and moral concerns this research created, well, Dr. Yang Zhang believed that using human sperm for these experiments was ethically okay, since it's naturally produced on its own anyways and mostly goes to waste. Researchers would never get to see the trial through, though. The test chimp was allegedly 3 months pregnant when the experiment had to be halted in 1967, due to the Cultural Revolution led by Mao Zedong. And the chimp ultimately died from neglect. Now, up to this point, there have been hundreds of reports of human-ape hybrids over the years. But that's all they are, reports with little to no evidence to back them up. Until 1977, when genetics researcher J. Michael Bedford discovered that human sperm could indeed adhere to and penetrate the outer membrane of a gibbon egg. Finding that human sperm was surprisingly extremely specific in what it would penetrate. During the course of his research, he injected human sperm into the eggs of various animals. The only egg the sperm penetrated was the gibbons. It wouldn't even attach to the egg of sub-hominid primates like the baboon or rhesus monkey. When asked what would happen to a chimpanzee egg, he suggested a positive result, saying, "Given that they are closer to a human than a gibbon, it's likely that chimpanzee sperm would be able to fertilize a human egg and vice versa." We now know that if a single strand of human DNA is overloaded with enough chimp DNA, they will eventually pair up. They just won't match perfectly. For years, rumors of these taboo experiments being carried out in the United States, Russia, China, and Italy have circulated. But with the ethical and moral issues that arise, I think we'd be hard-pressed to find scientists who will actually admit that they're in possession of human-ape hybrids. I think we'd be shocked if we knew the truth. With chimps living so close to humans in certain parts of the world, it's not beyond the realm of possibilities. Stories of half-human, half-ape hybrids have been around for hundreds of years, with the most recent claims coming out of Angola in January of 2020, where a woman on her deathbed claimed that she had had a long-term physical relationship with a wild chimp, resulting in the birth of her then 12-year-old son. Now, as far as we know, her son hasn't undergone genetic testing, so until we hear otherwise, it's just a rumor. Dr. Antonio Mendez of the Luena Municipal Hospital said, "Sexual relationships between humans and chimpanzees are fairly common in the region, but this is the first time a pregnancy is officially reported." As humans, we tend to chase pervasive urban legends. We seek out things that are strange and different. And with such a taboo subject, it's easy to see why these kinds of stories catch on. The notion of a hybrid human seems plausible and terrifying all at once. Now, I pass the question off to you. Had you heard about Oliver before today? Do you think it's possible that human-ape hybrids exist? If you appreciate today's video, give it a thumbs up, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on the next investigation.